Imagine a modern tech giant. Give them a private army of 300,000 soldiers. Let them write treaties, pass laws, and collect taxes directly from citizens. For its first century and a half, the East India Company operated as a mercantile guild. They maintained coastal factories, trading British silver and gold for Indian silk, cotton, and spices. The transition to political power occurred in 1765. Following a decisive military victory at Buxar, the company forced the Mughal emperor to grant them the Diwani, the right to collect and manage the revenues of the wealthy Bengal province. The emperor's formal decree converted a London-based merchant guild into the subcontinent's most powerful landlord, responsible for millions. Looking at their eastern footprint, the scale is obvious. They held total administrative control over an area rivaling major European nations in size and economic output. This created a structural contradiction. A sovereign state is built to govern and protect its subjects. But the East India Company existed for a single purpose: to maximize dividend payouts for shareholders in London. Once the company secured the power to tax, they ceased importing British bullion. Instead, they repurposed the Mughal land tax system, extracting revenue directly from local Indian farmers to purchase the export goods. They were essentially acquired using the subjects' own money. These massive revenues didn't just fund dividends. They were poured straight back into an aggressive campaign of military expansion across the subcontinent. The company built a private military force that grew to over 300,000 men. It stood as one of the largest standing armies on the planet. The vast majority of these troops were the sepoys, local Indian mercenaries. The company deliberately recruited high-caste Hindu Rajputs and Muslims, adapting military drills and camp life to fit their religious requirements to secure their loyalty as corporate enforcers. With this massive force, the company imposed subsidiary alliances on independent Indian princes. These rulers were forced to surrender their diplomatic autonomy and pay massive fees for company protection. It was a self-sustaining loop of conquest. The company annexed a territory, heavily taxed its population, and used those taxes to hire more soldiers to threaten the next state. Before British rule, India was a global manufacturing hub, particularly famous for exporting high-quality finished textiles. Under the company's administration, that industry was systematically dismantled to clear the market for British mills. The company re-engineered the subcontinent's economy to serve as an agricultural supply chain. They pressured Indian sectors to shift away from finished goods and mass-produce raw cotton, opium for the China trade, and natural indigo dye. Meeting corporate export quotas required grueling physical labor. In the indigo factories of Bengal, local peasants were forced to work submerged in massive vats to extract the blue dye favored by European fashion and military uniforms. By the mid-19th century, the volume of these raw materials was immense. The company needed a more efficient way to move thousands of tons of cash crops from the interior to coastal shipping ports. The company launched the massive Indian railway network as an extraction tool. British engineers laid tracks connecting interior raw material hubs directly to coastal ports, ensuring a fast, subsidized flow of goods to London. They also terraformed the landscape to artificially boost crop yields. Projects like the 350-mile Ganges Canal required immense capital and engineering, redirecting rivers to irrigate cash-producing farmland in the Doab region. This wasn't a benevolent effort to modernize India. The company was methodically rewiring the physical geography of a subcontinent to serve as a streamlined extraction machine for a foreign monopoly. The pressure inside this extractive system eventually reached a breaking point. Crushing land taxes pushed peasant farmers into poverty. The company routinely disregarded local cultural traditions, and even the sepoys began losing their traditional status and perks. In 1857, the system fractured into the Indian Rebellion. The sepoys turned their corporate weapons against their employers, fighting brutal battles across the northern provinces. Company outposts were only saved by a recent technological investment. The electric telegraph network allowed British commanders to flash warnings ahead of the rebel forces and coordinate a counterattack. The company suppressed the rebellion, but the political fallout in London was absolute. In 1858, the British Parliament passed the Government of India Act, fully liquidating the East India Company and nationalizing its entire operation. The era of corporate management ended. The British Crown assumed direct administrative control, transitioning the company's massive military and civilian bureaucracy into the permanent state apparatus of the British Raj. The East India Company left behind the physical hardware of a modern state, railways, telegraphs, and unified laws. But these tools were forged through the systematic dismantling of the Indian economy, leaving a blueprint for how corporate interests can subsume the functions of a sovereign nation.